Welcome to Be Connected. What in the world and what in the world is going on here? I got a fire alarm going. We'll just kind of power through it though. They're testing the sprinkler system here and it sets off the fire alarm. So that'll just be we'll have an interesting reference point here. But we're going to talk about podcasting today. And obviously, if you're doing a live podcast, just like this live show, things happen. So
Oh,
part of it
what a
is,
great topic to bring up. I love podcasting. You know that. I love live streaming. And you know what? That's a great topic to bring up right from the beginning. Expect the unexpected.
yep, and that is one of the things when you go into it. It's like so many things in life, right? You can talk about doing it. One of the questions I have for people, if you're joining us live on this show, is do you have a podcast? And then a lot of people I talk to, they say, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I was in that category for quite some time, is just in that category of what maybe I should or shouldn't have a podcast. And then I kept saying I want to and didn't. So, and some of these type of thing, what would happen if this goes wrong or that goes wrong, was one of the reasons why, excuses, if you will, that I didn't do it. But Christine, you do a lot of streaming.
I
I'll talk
I do.
specifically about Be Connected and how I do my podcast on this platform, um, and answer some of those questions. And I'll highlight a few things about this on this show. But Christine, from your perspective, you've been doing live streaming, podcasting, supporting clients in the area of podcasting for quite some time.
I
And so,
have.
what your perspective when you're talking to your clients or you're coaching people on whether they should or shouldn't do it, why would they do a podcast, what kind of value and that kind of thing? What do you share in that? What's your point of view?
Oh goodness, I love this topic. And you may not remember, but my background is actually public speaking and I taught public speaking and coached the speech and debate team. So presentations has always been a big part of my life for much longer than I'd care to admit. And so that being the case, right, the podcasting to me, broadcasting shows, whatever you want to call them, to me is a really just another opportunity to get out there and to get your voice heard, right? To share what's important to you, help others, right? That's all in that space. And so I don't have a lot of distinguish between the different formats, right? Do what works best for you, but we see the evolution where we have just one person talking or an interview style or as an educational focus, right? Why do you want a podcast, right? So as you start talking about it, what do I want to get out? What's so important that I want to share, right? And everybody's got once you figure out what your mission is, now you know what you want to talk about. So until you figure that out, right, you got to kind of narrow it down and decide what's my mission of my podcast or my broadcast or my show. And from there, you can step forward into it. And it may or may not have anything to do with your business area, right? We've had people that were I'm pretty sure you know about our local DFW amateur meteorologist who is now a professional meteorologist, if you know
Okay.
him at all, right? And so
Yeah.
he started off, that wasn't even his career. It was something that he loved to do. That was a passion. And anytime there's a storm in the Dallas Fort Worth area, you got 1,000 people signed into his private Facebook group, seeing what he's got to say about it. They don't want to hear from the people that are on the national news. No, they want to hear from their local guy, right? So you can turn a hobby into something like that. That's a podcast. And it was weather reports. Okay. It's literally about the weather. How many followers could you possibly, you'd be surprised, especially when the weather's always changing in Texas, right?
Yeah.
So
So
it
so doing a
yeah,
podcast, when you've looked at the various types of podcasts as you look at it, and for those that are on the Be Connected platform, you have a platform here that can collectively, you could do 90% of what creation of the content and stuff right on this platform. So that's an amazing thing. But this show is about strategy. This show is about the why. This is the value. This is the things, because that's important, as you just said. Figure out what it is that you want to accomplish, And then we can talk about the how, the tools, the capabilities that you can bring to the table. But while doing that, one of the things that I early on when I started the Warrior versus Zombie podcast, I was doing it first in a studio. And I said, I just want to focus on my local warriors. And my podcast is interviewing warriors to get their story and their vision out, whatever that is. In a 30-minute show, get their story, how they got from where they started to today, and then what zombies got in their way, and then what is their vision going forward? Why are they doing what they're doing now? Where are they going? What kind of impact do they want to have? So that's kind of the frame that I created the Warrior versus Zombie podcast, to feature warriors. And then it's a metaphor, of course, and it gets a lot of attention because of the name. So those are things that you can play with. Interestingly enough, as with your meteorologist friend, or that's kind of a hobby, I was doing it as an added value or a way to serve my community. Then the pandemic hit, or the zombie apocalypse, as I call it. And I had to either say, I'm going to wait till they open the studio back up. And you guys know how that played out in 2020. It wasn't 15 days, it was X number of months. And so I had to say, I'm either going to put it on pause, or I'm going to figure out how to do it online. I started doing it on Zoom, learned how to do it on Zoom, and the move to this platform was better. But I did live in the Hive, if you will, live on the BeeKonnected, because originally we started with Zoom as our virtual meeting and then moved to the Meeting platform, which actually enables me to do a lot of things on this platform. The BeeKonnected integration is really where it all comes together. You notice here, I'm doing this, and if I were doing my podcast, I can have Warrior versus Zombie channel, so people can go and click on that, or I could customize it any way I want. I could put my guest's website up there in that area on the left. I have my audio podcast website, which a person that's watching this show can connect on, or click on and go to that podcast. Or then at the bottom there is schedule a one-to-one. If you want to be a guest, you want to be a host, just schedule a one-to-one and on my calendar. It's very efficient. But the question is that I was going to ask you, Christina, from your experience, what are the factors if I'm considering doing a podcast, whether I do it by myself or with other people? Like in this show, you're helping me out. Zip's on here, and he's probably got some questions. And so I don't think he has a lot of personal experience with being on or doing podcasts. So tell me a little bit about the things beyond that, the considerations, what kind of podcast you want to do, or even about being on a podcast.
Well, and I'd also like people, like you said, let us know if you're doing a podcast. If so, drop a link to your podcast. We want to see it. We want to be able to follow you and see what you're up to. There's a lot of different formats, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong. The more we think of it now, we're in that instant gratifications part of our life, right? This is what's normal on social. And so we're wanting that kind of, entertainment. So you might have edutainment, and we've talked about that before, David, right? But
Right.
the idea is to, can you keep an audience entertained by yourself? You probably can. And some people have a great personality for that. A lot of people need someone to interact with, right? So it's nice to have maybe a co-host, or maybe you're doing more of an interview style, right? It just depends on what your goal is. I tend to do a lot of teaching also. So I might have somebody as a co-host as we're co-teaching something. Other times, can I teach by myself? Absolutely. Did it for years and years,
Yeah.
right? So it depends on what the goal of your podcast, right? If your goal is to teach, then sometimes it's nice to have someone else come in and teach with you, or someone else teach something. They can be a guest volunteer teacher, right? So whatever it is, you got to pick out what's right for you, what's going to be the best for your exact topic. It's not cookie cutter, right? But whatever it is, make sure you bring in that element of entertainment. People want to be entertained, right? Don't be the, Bueller.
Uh,
We want personality. So be fun.
well, and that's the case is it is content. It is it has to be interesting. You want to keep not only for the duration of the show, right? But you also want people to come back for the next episode. So when you think about having them come back for the next episode and be entertained in the show, are those two different things in your mind?
Okay.
And there's so much blend. When we talk about shows, right, and keeping people entertained, it's going to be a blend of personalities. You got to do what feels right for you. I'm going to come back to that over and over again, David. I really am, because your podcast or your show or your broadcast or your masterclass, whatever you want to call your broadcast, right? It's going to have to go along with you, your personality type, what your goals are, what's the branding on your business, right? What are you trying to do, right? It's all going to be tied in together to make those decisions on what's going to work best for your business.
Yeah, and we've got Darlene here, and Darlene, my question that we were talking about, you can feel free to post in the chat. Zip or Christina or I can address it. But do you have a podcast? Are you considering a podcast? I know you're on the BeeKonnected platform, so I'd be interested in you sharing that in the chat. So, but the key here is, Christine mentioned several things here that I consider fundamentals. One is I did 100 episodes of Warrior versus Zombie before I decided to turn on the ads. In other words, to monetize the podcast. Now, the reason I did that was because I wanted to learn along the way. I mean, if you go to my very first episode where we were doing in the studio, and it was Rickey Gene Wright and I, we weren't quite sure what we were doing. And he did me and I did him. We just interviewed each other and we did it in the studio. It's kind of a practice thing, but that was episode 1. And it's a lot different now. Episode, 137 that I just did or whatever is a lot different than episode 1. So it is a journey. And that's one of the things when people are talking about it, and I want you to weigh in. Would you agree that it's getting started and then figuring out what's resonating with people that are showing up, if you will, and not just showing up live? Live in the Hive is great, but really the 400 downloads I have on the audio podcast are where the biggest audience comes from, right? They're the ones that are really doing it, and they're not seeing it live. And I do a little bit of post show edit. And that's the beauty of this platform as well, is I get an audio video that can go to like a YouTube channel or to my BeeKonnected channel. But I also have the audio, which is both are HD, by the way, HD video, HD audio. And so the audio quality of my podcast improved when we shifted from doing it on Zoom to doing it on the BeeKonnected on our virtual meeting platform that we have today. So that's pretty cool. And that does have an impact. I can tell when the quality improved and when we went live versus just doing a recorded audio podcast, just going live doubled my audience in a course of a few weeks.
Yeah, and Darlene mentions when she started watching podcasts, right, she would download them. This way she could listen to them when it was convenient for her. And that's the beauty of it, is being able to choose when you want to listen, right? And that's the flexibility, being able to go back to watch a YouTube video, listen to a podcast, right? And do it on your schedule. So a lot of times your people aren't live, right? So it's more of an evergreen content kind of concept, which is a great way for people to find you later, right?
Go ahead. Well, I had the experience, but I'm still kind of analyzing over time how that really happened. But if you've got a theory, Christine, go ahead.
Well, when you go live on a lot of platforms, they'll actually have a little pop-up. For example, the book that is Faces will have something that pops up and says so and so is live now, so that people will click on it. Right. So if you just
Mhm.
upload a video, it doesn't do that. Right. So they're going to already
Right.
automatically expose you to more people. Right. And if anybody who's ever scrolled through reels, right, so the video can be repurposed into those kinds of purposes, right? So
Mhm.
there's opportunities there, and even you can go live now on Instagram, and you couldn't do that before. So you're seeing some changes on that, but um, just the fact that people know, whereas they might not have known otherwise, because we all know you post something on other platforms and it just sits there, and it may sometimes get shown and it may sometimes not. And even then, when it does show at a very small percentage of the 6,000 people I'm connected to, right? Like this tiny itty bitty percentage actually gets to see it, right? But at
Yeah.
least if they get a pop up that says Christina's live, then they're like, oh, okay. That probably gets more notifications than anything else.
Yeah. And in fact, the Live in the Hive, to be clear on that, this show and my podcast, when I do one live, shows up on the main dashboard for everybody to see.
And I
So
love that. That's one of my favorite features about BeeKonnected is that the shows are important. Broadcasting is important. What we're doing and getting the word out is important, because how many platforms do you go to where they have a right in the feed at the very top, right there, always visible? This is what's coming up next.
yes.
This is the next event going on. What? You know,
Yeah, and that's fixing to get a whole lot better on this platform too, because it's all going to be built around. Because really, when you think about social business, and then you think about ultimately connecting out to media, it's really creating that content that has value that people can then turn around and go. The thing that when I said I wasn't sure, I knew it got more eyes, and I'm thinking when I do the audio podcast, really all I asked the guests to do was, once we've completed it and it's recorded, please share it on your website, share it on, if you like it. If you don't like it, I apologize, but if you like what it if it worked for you, then share it with your audience. So that naturally creates this, my audience sees it, your audience sees it. So there's two people. But when you go live, even if there's only like 4 or 5 people in the Live in the Hive BeeKonnected, that's 4 to 5 times the couple people that would be promoting it. Somebody said, oh, I heard a really good podcast. I'm figuring that some of that organic compounding occurs. So, but whatever it is, I think the most important thing, and you, Christine, you said this on some of the things we've talked about, is just do it, right? If you really believe that's an area that you can add, is that reasonable counsel at this point? Just
public
do it.
speaking
And what do
background,
it?
just get up and do it. That's what I used to tell my students. It doesn't matter what happens, just get up and do it. You just learn how to prepare for the unexpected, and the unexpected will happen. I've watched people doing podcasts and their kids were crawling in on the floor and they're going,
Well, you just heard a fire alarm. If you were on in the beginning, you heard the
that's
fire
right.
alarm go off in
Crazy
mid-rise.
happens.
So
But I always tell
yeah,
them,
you just got to
what's
go
the
with it.
worst thing that could happen? What is the worst thing that's going to happen? Even if you drop dead in the middle of a show, well, you're not there to worry about it. So it doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah.
So seriously, I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? And if you didn't like it and it was a live broadcast, well, the few people that caught it live saw it. And if you really didn't like it, you can go back and delete it most of the time. So, nobody else has to see it after that. But you got to start somewhere. Right. And I always
Yeah.
encourage my clients, a lot of times they would go live in their private groups first. Right. So if you had a
Mhm.
group for that you just had your clients, and you might go live in there and give that a try. So if you're going to do this and stream, you might stream into your group. Right. And then you kind of build that confidence. I had a client, literally it took her a year to get the confidence to go live on her main page because she was so nervous about it. Right. But she got there, and she did it by going in a smaller group to start with.
Yeah, and I think that's as a teacher, that's probably one of the things, is the more you do it, the more you can realize that all the things that are in your head that could happen won't. 90% of them won't happen. And the ones that you thought might happen probably won't. Something else will happen. The fire alarm
Yeah.
will go off. So really, that's not the
Oh
thing.
yeah.
One of the things I was going to ask or suggest to folks is sometimes start launching your own podcast can be a little bit scary. And what I tell people is, I get that. And find a podcast like mine, and not mine in particular, but where you can be on the podcast and you can begin to get the flow and get that kind of comfort level of doing this, because that's a big thing. I mean, you learn, okay, I don't like to do this, or I don't like there's certain things about podcasts that I've learned by listening to them and being on other people's podcasts. It says, well, that's great for you, and I'm glad to support you on your podcast. I'm not going to do my podcast that way. I want to do it this way. Now, whether I'm right or wrong is really determined by our audience, right? They listen to it and they say, yeah, that was good or that wasn't. And then if they didn't like it, I always like to listen to the feedback, right?
I'm going to jump in on that, David, and piggyback on that. I had somebody there like, I love your energy. I want you to be a host on our podcast. And they were all excited about it. And I'm like, okay, well, let me find out more. They wanted us to pretty much script out the whole podcast. And I was like, this is not my idea of fun. I almost sent me into a panic attack because I was like, this sounds like horrible. If we're all going to just get up and read scripts, what's the point? You know what I mean? It's a movie show at that point. You've written the dialogue. All I have to do is be an actor showing up. It just, to me, was so just not authentic. And I was like, I'm just not interested. Thanks, but no thanks. And they're like, well, we're getting a lot of success. I'm like, good for you. Have lots of success. Best of luck to you. Got to go. It's not me.
Yeah. And I love that, because here's the deal. This is part of my ideal day, what I'm doing here today. When I do my podcast, it's part of my ideal day. And you said something that is so important, and that is, do you do what is fun for you. Because if it's work, I can tell you from my standpoint, I'm guessing most people on here, if doing the show is just another thing to do, and Christine and I have had some conversation about doing this show and how to do this show and things like that, where it doesn't become work. It's not such that we can do it and have fun with it, but it's not having us do things we don't want to do when we want to do them. I love shows, and they're very valuable, that kind of talk about how do you do this, how do you do that, whether it's a YouTube channel or whether it's any other kind of channel, right? Learning how to do things on BeeKonnected, how to do a podcast, how to do this, how to do that. That's not my jam. I mean, I'm not the teacher like you are, Christine.
Right. And I love the how-tos.
I don't think I could do that, but there's a huge amount of value to that. So if you're good at the how to and doing tutorials and walking people through, and you can do that in a succinct and an entertaining way, but not drag it out like I would probably do, then, because that's me. I know me, and I know that what I would be able to do. I like this. I like
Well,
saying
and
this is
like
the
I said, that other style where they're writing out the scripts, for some people that would be perfect. They're like, well, I don't have to worry about what's going to happen because everybody knows. Everybody's scripted. I wrote my part, they wrote their part, everybody feels comfortable. So certain personality types, that's perfect. That's exactly what they want. Right. But that's not me. But there's, for somebody it's perfect. So let them do what they do best in that space that they enjoy.
Well,
And
there's billions of shows out there on all these other platforms and stuff, right? So I don't know how many
choose
there are.
something that you're passionate about. Choose
Yeah.
something that you want to share. It's something that's a lot of fun. My honey loves to watch the reels with the dad and the kid some kind of like car expert, and he's like fixing and doing the hands-on fixing the kids. I mean, the kid's got to be like 10 or something, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's so cute though, but very New York. And so New York, Jersey kind of area. And so
Yeah.
he loves that kind of stuff. And I'm not someone I choose because I can care what I don't know what goes under the hood of a car, right? That's not my thing, but everybody's got their area. So figure out what's your sweet spot, whatever that is. And it can be business or not business, right? And you never know, that hobby might turn into something you end up monetizing.
Yeah, well, I was always amazed at how much what is it, that home channel or whatever that's
The
always
home
on all
shopping
these places.
channel.
Home shopping, all these shows that come up and you think, who's going to watch that? There must be an audience because there's a whole thing. Well, we're down to 1 minute in, but thank you, Christine, for helping me with this topic. Obviously, we just scratched the
Just
surface.
scratch
and
the
we're
surface.
talking
We got some great questions. Like, Darlene was wondering about how long the recommended the show should be. I mean, those are more topics to go, right? There's always more to talk
Yeah.
about when it comes to broadcasting.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of it, as we've heard, even with Christine and I think we're very aligned, and we both have now a lot of experience. I started with no experience, just like Darlene and others that are on here. And the key is getting started. And I'm happy, and I know Christine is as well. We're on the platform here on BeeKonnected in this community to serve. So click on the link, follow up with us. If you want to know what my audio podcast website looks like, click on that link. It'll open up another tab. If you want to see the Warrior versus Zombie channel on BeeKonnected, where there's 100 and some episodes there, replays, and that's a straight replay for the most part. There's no editing or whatever, so you can see kind of how the sausage is made. But that's one of the powers of this platform. You can put this together and do it and have fun with it. So having fun is kind of the bottom line for me.
Right.
Is if it's
if you've
fun,
got questions about it, reach out to us, because both of us have been doing this for a while. I've been producing for several clients now for years. I love what I do. I love this space. So if this is something you've been thinking about, reach out. I know David and I both love being a resource to help the community.
Absolutely. And this is such a helpful and powerful community to be part of. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Darlene, Zip, and obviously Christine. Thank you for being here today. We'll be back.
Good show. Thank you very much for that information. And I thought of a good idea, couple good ideas.
Yeah. And I think we
right.
ought to work on that CBD one. We could talk about that and figure out how to, and it's just a matter of how to go about it. If you can't carry a whole show by yourself and you want somebody to work, just find some partners or partner to help you.
Well, that's what I was going to do. I wasn't going to do a half an hour. I was going to do like 10 minutes with some of our leading marketers and things like that.
Just keep it real short, simple, and direct and to the point. Absolutely.
Yep.
Short is not bad. Short form is actually gets a lot more engagement a lot of times than the long form.
People will listen for 5 minutes. They aren't going to listen for half an hour.
maybe a minute in the days of TikTok, maybe a minute, 90 seconds. But
there you go. Anyway. That's it. And time's up.
All right,
thanks,
guys.
Y'all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good evening,
Bye.
good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. And we'll be back on Wednesday this week for another one. Talk to you later.
Bye.